As conservatives' cruel war of oppression against trans people escalates, one popular right-wing pundit drops the mask of civility and issues a dangerous call to action. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So over this past weekend, CPAC occurred, and for those of you who are blissfully unaware of what CPAC is, it's basically the biggest and most popular and most prominent politically conservative convention in the country. Not only do you have Republican voters and conservative voters attending en masse, you also have very prominent conservative thought leaders and pundits and commentators, and also sitting members of the Republican Congress, Republican senators, Republican governors, and even the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. He was the keynote speaker. So it's a big deal, right? If you're speaking at CPAC, you are legitimized by America's right wing, by its fringe, by its mainstream, by its mouthpieces in the Republican Party. You're a big deal, okay? So all of that is to say that, it's not just this random or obscure group of fringe right-wingers. This is, in terms of conventions, political conventions, CPAC is the standard bearer for the right wing in America. And the reason I bring that up is because a conservative commentator named Michael Knowles, who I'm sure you're familiar with, he is a very, very popular conservative commentator. He works for the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's news network, such as it is news network. He's got like nearly 1 million followers on TikTok. To me, he is the new and improved Ben Shapiro in the sense that over time, Shapiro has kind of mellowed. Like if you look, when Ben Shapiro rose to prominence, he was the guy who would own the libs and drink liberal tears and stuff like that, and he was dunking on college kids. He's kind of chilled a bit. I mean, his views are still abhorrent, right? But he's like positioning himself as more of the palatable, the more mainstream accessible right-winger. Like he does his Sunday show where he talks to, he's done multiple debates and conversations with the Young Turks, Anna Kasparian and stuff like that. So like he's almost like the good cop of the Daily Wire now. And Michael Knowles has taken his place, in my opinion, as the preeminent right-wing troll. He's more sophisticated and cunning than somebody like Steven Crowder or Matt Walsh, who's just kind of this disgusting brute. Knowles, he throws a smile on his face. And actually, he kind of reminds me a bit of the Joker. He is like a professional troll. He's very well spoken. He's very cunning in conversation. He's had, back and forth with like David Pakman and stuff like that. And he's just kind of smiling the whole time and like poking and prodding. And of course, David Pakman is beautifully passive aggressive as well for those of us on the left. So they had a great back and forth. But that's Michael Knowles. Well, he was one of the speakers at CPAC, and he issued a very dangerous call to action. And I think we may have done a video about another statement that he made on his Daily Wire show just a few days before this speech at CPAC. And it was basically the same thing. Knowles basically drops the mask of civility with respect to conservatives on trans issues. Now, you could make the argument that that mask really wasn't there to begin with, and fair enough, but a statement like this that I'm about to play for you is really beyond the pale. If anything, I guess you could make the case it's actually really honest, that unlike a lot of other conservatives who are either too cowardly or too tepid to just flat out tell you what they want to do, Michael Knowles has no such compunction, and he'll tell you exactly what he wants, what his end goal is, but it's a terrifying end goal. So let's listen to it.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So he is, and he did it here at CPAC, and he did it a couple of days before CPAC again on his own show. But there he is calling for the advocacy of the eradication. He's advocating for the eradication of transgenderism. Now, people like Vosh have been saying for months that that the right is advocating for genocide when it comes to trans people. And I've hesitated to use that term because I think that you could probably make a technical case, but I think that the word genocide is so loaded that I feel like you should only deploy it, under extreme measures. This to me is genocidal rhetoric, and here's why. Transgenderism isn't an ideology. It's an identity. It's as much of an identity as sexual orientation. Imagine, if you will, that another right-wing speaker said we must eradicate Judaism from public life, right? Most people, including, I imagine, quite a few people on the right, would be like, oh my God, you're advocating for genocide. That's stuff that the Nazis said in the 20s and 30s. We must eradicate Judaism. And they would be right to say that that's genocidal. If a leftist said publicly that we need to eradicate heterosexuality from public life, you would have outraged right-wingers say, oh my God, you're advocating for the genocide of heterosexuals because there's no way to separate heterosexuality from people who have that identity, as is the case with Jews, right, and Judaism, as is the case with transgenderism and trans people. You can't separate the two. It's part of an inherent identity. And certainly in the case of something like sexual orientation, it's an immutable characteristic as much as race and ethnicity. But we could even take it a step back. Imagine, if you will, something that's not immutable, like your religious faith. Imagine if a very popular leftist atheist commentator publicly called for the public eradication or the eradication of Christianity from public life. Do you think it's possible that right-wingers would be like, oh my God, you are advocating for the death of Christians? Well, I imagine they would say yes, and it would, be understandable why they would interpret it that way, right? Which is why you don't have very popular, leftist atheist commentators, certainly not on the level of somebody like Michael Knowles. There's no counterpart to him advocating for something like that, because even most people on the left would be like, that's really sketchily worded, that's pretty aggressive, that's a dangerous call to action, even if we believe in a separation between church and state. Calling for the eradication of Christianity from public life is a bridge too far. But they're very comfortable making statements like that about the trans community. And as a reminder, as we've done a couple of videos on this, but the right wing in this country, particularly in the Republican Party, they're being very aggressive in their anti-trans legislation. This year alone, in the 2023 legislative session, the ACLU is tracking 385 anti-LGBTQ bills, okay, of which anti-trans law is like the centerpiece. 2022, we saw a huge escalation, right? But 2023 is set up to just blow that trend out of the water. And it's not just for minors, right? And even Michael Knowles is saying it's not enough. It's not enough to simply oppress trans minors ostensibly to protect minors, right? You also need to oppress trans adults. And we covered a law, I think it was out of Utah or Oklahoma, where it's banning gender-affirming care for trans people even at the age of 26, right? Which is 8 years past when you become an adult in this country. So they're escalating their rhetorical and legislative war against the trans community. And trans people, of course, as we've talked before, have a high rate of suicidality relative to others. You're talking about 1.4 million people, I think, by some estimates. This is a marginalized, persecuted group which is becoming more marginalized and more persecuted by one half of the political apparatus in this country, the Republican Party. It's extremely dangerous. People are going to get killed as a result of this. The only other thing I want to point out here is after he made this speech, Rolling Stone issued a headline. And the original headline said, CPAC speaker calls for the eradication of transgender people, or trans people. And Michael Knowles tried to hide behind the idea that, well, transgenderism and trans people aren't the same. So what you're saying is libelous, and I demand a retraction. So Rolling Stone initially folded, but then they updated it again. And so their current headline is CPAC speaker calls for the eradication of transgenderism and somehow claims he's not calling for elimination of transgender people. And then the subheader says, There is no separating a ban on transgenderism from an attack on transgender people, says activist Aaron Reed. They are one and the same, and there's no separation between them. And again, that's true, right? Just as there's no separation between Judaism and Jews, or heterosexuals and heterosexuality and homosexuality and homosexuals, the same thing. I mean, you're talking about inherent, notions of gender and sexual orientation and race and ethnicity. Those things can't be separated from the people who have those identities. So this is a dangerous escalation, and I think it vindicates people like, again, Vaush, commentators like Vaush, who have been saying that the right wing has had a genocidal rhetoric with respect to trans people. Again, I hesitated to say that, but I mean, it's hard to appeal to skepticism and civility when you have Michael Knowles, who again is not just some random right winger. He's an extremely popular, extremely influential conservative commentator. He was a guest speaker at CPAC, so that's another form of legitimacy. He's one of the primary pillars of the Daily Wire, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, right-wing social media outlet, right? So this is a big deal. And this is another reason why we have to do everything in our power, legally, morally, legislatively, activistically, to keep conservatives out of power. They can't be trusted with it. Hey you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.